Has America made it illegal to be poor? Now, this might sound absurd, but it's not the first time that being poor has been criminalized. You might have heard that Australia was once used as a prison colony, but what is not such common knowledge is that most of these so called prisoners were not criminal. Rather, the vast majority were only guilty of being poor. Uh, to say the laws of 17th through 18th century England were draconian would be a grand understatement. Under what was known as the Bloody Code, even such mild offenses as cutting down a tree or poaching a rabbit carried a death sentence. Very few who committed one of these 222 Bloody Code death sentence crimes were ever sent to Australia or even spent any meaningful amount of time in prison. Execution was swift. They had to make space for the next British subject that needed to die. Those who were shipped to the prison colonies were often guilty of nothing more than homelessness. It should come as no surprise that these actions and events stemmed from the economy and had little to nothing to do with criminal or immoral behavior. While that era of English history is best known for its imperial expansion and corresponding wealth, abject poverty abounded at home. While the ruling class was becoming filthy rich off the backs of slaves in foreign lands, and they borrowed the nation under a mountain of toxic debt, the average person at home was starving. The Industrial Revolution had created massive employment on one hand, but it also had pulled people away from their age-old sustainable lifestyles. Those industrial jobs in the city didn't pay as well as they had been promised, and the peasantry had not accounted for the higher cost of living accompanied with city living. But there's another key element at work: that greater inflated poverty. Even hundreds of years ago, the wealthy learned that it was more profitable to use slave labor in foreign lands than to employ the people at home. The end result was a nation struggling with poverty and homelessness, especially in their largest cities, such as London. Similar to today, there were two rivaling political factions warring over how to solve this crisis. The left wing of the day favored the creation of social programs, while the ruling class, which was largely comprised of the right wing, they proposed a less gentle alternative, an alternative that, rather than costing them, could be profited by. The right wing declared that these people were far more than just poor, but they were socially irredeemable, a perpetual burden on society. And while the majority of them didn't hurt anyone, they were called the breeding grounds of criminals, lazy, irresponsible, prone to bad behaviors of drugs and alcohol and sex. So, for the betterment of productive society and the good of the law-abiding citizens and higher moral class, these lesser people were incarcerated by the tens of thousands, a rate of imprisonment that the world had never seen before. Not only did this serve to clean up the city's streets, it gave the illusion of a better economy by hiding that lowest rung, and they created a thriving industry centered around the criminalization of poverty and its incarceration. Now, for the middle classes, they saw only benefit. They rounded up the poor and convicted them of small, petty, non-violent crimes and sending them off to prison and then shipped off to Australia. The reduction of that lower class of the population made them feel safer, even if there was no meaningful change in the actual rate of serious crimes. While there is a connection between crime and poverty, when it comes to serious crimes such as child molestation or human trafficking or murder, income element begins to blur or even disappear altogether. Nothing illustrates this more clearly than the fact that white-collar criminals steal many times that of what blue-collar criminals steal, but will receive on average 1/10 of the prison sentence today. Often these middle and upper class criminals won't even be prosecuted. Over the last years and decades, we have heard many of our nation's best-known prosecutors say that by giving the maximum sentence to minor offenses, we would see an overall reduction in crime. By locking up a man for a busted taillight and a bit of pot in the car, we would proactively be preventing the next mass shooting or some other horrific event. Even though the facts have not proven this to be true, this preconception is still on the forefront of our legal system. And I caution anyone from getting hung up on any singular subject such as marijuana. There are literally tens of thousands of laws that adversely affect the poor disproportionately to that of the middle or upper classes, such as the cost of vehicle registration or emissions testing, or a dog license. The poorest 25% of Americans, for these small bills are a notable percentage of their income. In many respects, America today is reflecting England of over 200 years ago and the criminalization of poverty. America incarcerates at a higher rate than any other nation on this planet, and by a very wide margin. And rather than eradicating crime, we have created an industry centered around the cycle of incarceration. And the players and motivations are eerily similar to that of the bloody code era of England. But hey, everybody, if TikTok goes dark here in a couple of days, you can find me on YouTube at My 2 Cents Einer Walter. Einer is spelled E-I-N-E-R, Walter, W-A-L-T-E-R. YouTube at My 2 Cents Einer Walter. Y'all have a good day out there. And would somebody send Luigi to pay the Supreme Court a visit? Just a thought.